ברשות ראש כולל, דיינים, רבנים חשובים, קהל קדוש. I don't think it's a coincidence that you chose this week in order to dedicate yourself to law and order and justice, being that we just finished reading Parashat Shofetim. It is the basis of Shofetim v'Shoterim, judges and enforcement. And then the Torah tells us that tzedek tirdof, that we have an obligation to pursue justice and pursue righteousness. And the Gemara Sanhedrin questions the double language, tzedek tirdof, and the Gemara says, halach ahar bedin yafeh. That if you have a choice between two batei dinim, and one has a little more expert judges, they're more fluent in the halakha, and the other one is a little more novice, a little more amateuristic, they're both legitimate, but you have an obligation to seek not just tzedek, but tzedek, creme de la creme. You have to choose the tzedek plus. That's the way the Gemara learns it, but it's well known what the Chidushei Harim said on this pasuk. There's an old debate amongst the philosophers about ends and means. And the question, of course, is, does the end justify the means? People have, very, very noble ends, have great things they want to accomplish. So the question is, at what expense to get there? Do we say that the ends justify the means? And therefore, if the end is good, doesn't matter how you get there, just get there, and there might be some casualties, and you might have to make some compromises, you might have to do some things that are a little improper, but for the greater good, ultimately society will benefit in the long term. So therefore, even though there's some minor infractions and minor compromises, and you might have to make some misdeeds, but for the greater good, all's well that ends well, as they say. That's one side. So the question is, what do we believe in? Well, we know what the communists believe. Let's talk about them for a second. When we were young, they used to read us stories before we went to sleep at night. I'm not too sure who decided that these stories were appropriate for children to read before they went to sleep, about bears stealing porridge and things like that. I don't know exactly how appropriate that is, before the kids go to sleep, to scare them and tell them about criminals. But they told us a story about Robin Hood. It's an old story, and they said how Robin Hood would steal from the rich in order to give to the poor. And they were trying to say that he's a hero in American culture, Robin Hood, because the rich have so much money anyway, and the poor doesn't have anything. And you think the rich guy is going to make a difference if you take a few $100 from him? It's not going to change his lifestyle, but $100 is going to make the poor man happy. And therefore, they were trying to say in Robin Hood world that the ends justify the means, and therefore he was right. And I have no doubt that this was the communist way of getting into the American children's brain. So you read them because Robin Hood's a communist, because it's division of wealth. Make everybody the same and take from the rich, give to the poor, division of wealth. And therefore this was a way to brainwash the children into thinking that democracy is not as good as communism. And that's what the Russians believed, and therefore they killed over 50 million of their own people, believing that it's justified because ultimately it'll bring the world to a panacea and a better place. So yes, if you ask a Russian or a communist, they'll tell you, all we care about is ends. And one of them said in a mashal, you have to crack the egg to get to the egg. So therefore you have to crack the shell. So therefore we have to crack a lot of eggs, but ultimately you'll get to the egg. What is the Torah's opinion? The Torah's opinion is that while ends are very important, means are just as important. And the Torah does not allow us to compromise any of the halakha, even if it's going to bring to greater good. And I'll just give you a famous it's a text from Rashi, from Yaakov Avinu, not in the context of business, but in the context of morals and right and wrong. So Yaakov Avinu alav shalom comes to, and he's the Ish Emet. Yaakov Avinu comes to the Har HaBayit, and Vayalen Sham, he goes to sleep, Kiba Hashemesh, because the sun set prematurely, and he has the dream, the Sulam, and this dream over here was a revelation. It wasn't a dream, it was a revelation of everything that's going to happen to Klal Yisrael, and he saw everything, with tremendous clarity. When he wakes up from the dream, I would have woke up, I would have said, B'kata Gomer, this is, what is Echut? Give thanks to God for such a revelation. Achen yesh Hashem b'makom hazeh. He says, yes, indeed, God is in this place. Baruchi lo yadachti. I didn't realize the concentration of godliness in this place. Rashi says, Ve'ilu she'ilu yadachti lo yashanti. If I would have known, I wouldn't have went to sleep. Now Yaakov Avinu is teaching us a lesson here. That means I would have been willing to be mevater, the entire nevuah and the entire revelation and the entire devekut that I received from this dream, which is a tremendous end. But to get there, I would have to transgress a halakha and Shulchan Aruch. You're not allowed to sleep in a Bet Knesset. You're not allowed to sleep in a Makom Kadosh. Now I would have said, well, let's put it on the scale. The dream against a technical foul. It's a misdemeanor. It's not a federal crime. I mean, the guy falls asleep in the Bet Knesset. It's okay. That's not the biggest. You still give the guy an aliyah. I mean, you're not gonna. By the way, when we're asking for shidduchim, you don't say, "Does he sleep in the bed? Did he ever fall asleep in the Bet Knesset?" No, the guy's. It's not something that. It's a small infraction, but it's Shulchan Aruch. Yaakov Avinu says, if I would have known from the onset that I have to sleep in this place, which is against halakha, but on the other side, I would get this prophecy, ilu liyadarti lo yashanti. Because the ends don't justify the means. And even if the means are very, very minimal in their infraction, it does not justify even the greatest of results. I learned with a Rabbi, Rav Chaim Weintraub, who was a Talmid of Aaron Kotler. Rav Chaim always used to tell us, he says, Eliyahu, you're going to become a Rav, and they're always going to throw things at you. And you're always going to be driven and motivated to do good things. But you always have to ask yourself, not how much good is going to come out, how much bad is going to come out. He says that's where you have to catch yourself, because we get blinded by good. We get blinded by creating and doing and accomplishing. But we don't realize that the over-anxiousness to do good blinds us sometimes from the bad that's going to come out. So we have to look at both sides, not only the end, but we have to focus on means. And that's what the Chedusharim says on the Pasuk. Tzedek, tzedek, tirdof. Tzedek, tzedek, tirdof is coming to tell us that not only do you have to pursue tzedek, which is the end, but tzedek, the pursuit of tzedek, must be in tzedek as well. The road to tzedek has to be paved in tzedek. Tzedek, tzedek. Don't only look at results, but how to get there. Well, once we understand this, I just want to bring to your attention a famous Harambam in Hilchot Sechirut, especially for people that work. You must know this Rambam. It's mandatory. Perek Yud Gimal Halakha Zayin. Kiderek shemuzhar ba'al habayit shelo yigzol schar ani. So the Baal Habayit, the employer, has responsibilities. He's not allowed to steal from his workers. He cannot steal wages. Well, the employee obviously has responsibilities as well. So he writes, Kacha ani muzhar shelo yigzol melechet ba'al habayit. So he's not allowed to steal from the work of the owner. V'yibatel me'at bekan u'me'at bekan. And he, wastes time. Rambam says he takes a little here, a little here. He's supposed to come at 9 o'clock in the morning. He shows up 9:05, 5 minutes. He's supposed to check out at 5 o'clock. He leaves a little earlier. And he's not, stealing in big increments. Me'at kan. V'nimsa kol hayom. Now, in our text over here, we have the word me'era, which means the whole day is in curse, me'era. But if you look at Shinui Nuschaot, and I'm sure the Frankel has it corrected already, he changes it to mirma. Mirma means deception. Umotzi kol hayom b'me'era. Or b'mirma. Good. Then he comes along and he says, "El hayav ledakdek al atzmo b'zman." You have to be careful of the zman. שהרי הקפידו חכמים על ברכה רביעית של ברכת המזון שלא יברך אותה. I mean, the worker in the olden days was exempt from making the fourth beracha, Birkat HaMazon, even though the fourth beracha is a takana from Hakamim in Yavne, Hatov HaMetiv, a very important beracha. The Mekubalim will tell you that the four berachot are connected to Shem Yud Kevavke, so you mehaser a letter of Hashem's name, Yaakov, according to the Kabbalists. Why? Because, listen, it's only Midrabanan at the end of the day, and get back to work. V'chen, and then the Rambam, it sounds like over here, since it's the end of Sechirut, so the Rambam just wants to throw everything in there. So he says, V'chen, like a PS. I have one more thing to tell you. Hayav la'avod b'chol koho. You have to work with all your strength. Sharei Yaakov HaTzadik. Yaakov the Tzadik. Rosh Kollel made a proper diuk, I think. Yaakov HaTzadik. You know, normally we don't preface, we don't give Yaakov the adjective tzaddik. That usually belongs to Yosef. And over here, the Rambam calls him Yaakov HaTzadik. We'll see. Amar ki bechol kuchi avadti et abichem. I worked for your father. He's telling his wives, I worked for your father Laban with all my energy. Lefichach natal sachar zot, and he got reward, and he became wealthy. La'olam hazeh, and he got his reward as well. La'olam haba. Now this Rambam sounds very straightforward. However, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, alav shalom, the Rosh Hashiva to Rav Adad, makes a very, very obvious diuk over here. He says, what's the ani doing? He's stealing me'at mikan u'me'at mikan. So then how could the Rambam then say, v'nimsa kol hayom b'mirma? When you kol hayom, it's not kol hayom. I mean, it's the 5 minutes that he stole in the morning, and it's the 5 minutes that he stole at the end of the day. I mean, between 9:05 and 4:30, he worked. So how could Harambam say a little here and a little there all of a sudden turns the entire day into mirma? It's a very strong question. Yaakov Kamenetsky says that this has to do with a culture of a person and a behavior and a lifestyle. He says, Harambam will tell you in a minute that part of the obligation of a worker is to work full-time, full energy, and put your all into it. If a person already is not makpid on coming on time and leaving on time, and is able to already take from the Baal Habayit during the course of the day, that already is an indication that even when he's working, he's not working full throttle. Nimsa kol hayom b'mirma. That already is indicative of the nature of this guy. If he could steal a couple of minutes here, steal a couple of minutes there, and in the middle of the day go surfing and take from the Zman over here, so that means he's not a loyal worker that's going to give kol kohot to the job. This is megaleh on the other hours that he is present. And even when he's present, he is not doing it. So therefore Harambam has to bring me Yaakov Abinu. When he brings v'chen hayav la'avod bechol koho, that's not a PS. That's germane to what he's talking about. He's saying the way you know if a person is oved bechol koho, if he's taking me'at kan u'me'at kan. And if he's taking me'at kan, you have a bigger problem, what Rambam is telling you. You don't only have a problem between 9 to 9:05 and 4:30 to 5 o'clock. You don't only have a problem of 35 minutes during the day. Your problem is the entire day, because you're obligated to work bechol koho the entire day. And if you're stealing increments of time from a me'at, you're in contempt the entire day. Nimsa kol hayom b'mirma. And I'll conclude, and here's where we have the chance, because we're religious, Baalei Batim, and therefore it's very easy for us to justify why we came 9:05, because it was a hard daf. And listen, some we know it, some of the dapim are harder than the others. And it's not always a 60-minute shiur. Sometimes the shiur goes over time. So it wasn't like I was, I slept late, or I was fooling around, or reading the newspaper. I had to finish the daf. So you walk in, you think you're considered the gadol hador. I'm late today, but I have a good excuse. Well, you have to leave early. Of course you have to leave early. There's always a Jewish holiday coming. There's always an Erev. There's always an Isru Chag. There's always a wedding. And these are all mitzvot. And it's very, very easy to rationalize that I'm doing God's business over here. And that's where we go back to ends and means. Tzedek, tzedek. You might have an end. I have to learn. It's a good end. I have to keep Shabbat. I have to keep Yom Tov. I have a wedding. I have Chesed. But to get to that end, if it means you have to steal from the Baal Habayit, then already one has to make great analysis. One has to think 100 times over. And that's where we're tempted. We're not tempted just to, take off a day to go surfing. No, that's not our Yetzer Hara. Our Yetzer Hara is to take off in order to do something that's good. And I think that's why the Rambam refers to Yaakov Abinu as Yaakov HaTzadik. Because if anybody had a good rationalization, it's Yaakov. I mean, he's working for a crook. He's working for a Ramai. I mean, they nicknamed him Labana Arami. The guy's a Ramai. And Yaakov Abinu is the man of Torah. So if anybody could justify why I could take a couple of minutes here to learn, working for the crook, he doesn't even pay me, all the different, machinations that you could make up, why it's okay. But Yaakov Abinu is teaching us tzedek, tzedek. And that's why he's called the tzaddik. Because he mastered the concept of tzedek, of justice. Here we're not referring to Yaakov Abinu in the sense of Torah, or the sense of his other midot that Yaakov represents, Tiferet and the Kabbalah. But here we're referring to Yaakov Abinu's measure of tzaddik. Tzaddik is somebody that is committed and is loyal to the pursuit of tzedek. And therefore, Yaakov Abinu, even though he worked for somebody that was, as such, he still worked properly. Bechol kocho. And that should give us a great musar, that our time is of the essence, and we shouldn't be blinded by the greater good. And I conclude with the story that they asked of Yaakov Kamenetsky. Somebody once said, I think it was a Purim day, fell out during the week, and called Yaakov Kamenetsky, and the guy said, can I call in sick? He wants to take off the day Purim. He's not sick, but he wants to call in sick. He said, but you're not sick. He said, I know, but I got a couple of sick days, so I just call in sick. He says, no, you shouldn't call in sick. But what are we going to do with the Seudat Purim? He says, make a bologna sandwich, bring a can of beer, and go, that's Seudat Purim. By your desk. Now, we wouldn't expect, if they were to call us, oh, for sure. Yeah, you have to lie. I mean, lying against Purim? I mean, Purim is Purim. You're going to give me Purim? And it's a white lie. And guess what? Everybody does it. And there's always Kippur. You can wash that one away, but you can't wash away a Purim. And therefore, we could figure out 101 ways to get this guy to take off. But Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky was pursuit to him. Where did it say you have to take off and work on Purim? If the boss doesn't give you off, so bring your Seudat to the desk, eat it, make Birkat Mazon, and go back to work. And that's it's a different way of thinking. It's a different way of thinking, and that's really the lesson. Ilu yadati lo yashanti. Yaakov said, if I would have known it's a holy place, I wouldn't have went to sleep in the first place, and I wouldn't have given up everything.
So the questions. So the questions we have we'll start with the questions that were submitted, and we'll go from there. So the and we asked Mr. Kajash Khan to moderate some of the questions. After seeing the shir, I think he didn't know what he was getting into moderating.
But before we formally start, I've been going to the Kollel events for about 15 years, as Rabbi Singer said. I went to the dinners and to the sivas, but I was never in the belly of the beast like we are here now. And I really enjoyed it. It was very energizing, and I want to thank everybody who organized it. I saw in the emails Rabbi Blezer, Rabbi Singer, Rabbi Pavalsky, Rabbi Parsons. Just a couple words before this started, the Kollel was nice enough to send me a video of what a moderator does. They wanted to make sure that I keep to the rules. They sent me a very specific video with Rabbi Lapiansky, a bit of this moderator. And there's also people in the Kollel that gave me advice. One person said that I should be hard on the Rabbanim if they try to wiggle out of an answer or try to dodge a question. I should use my deposition skills. But I told them that seeing the dizzying use of Aramaic and axioms from Gemara and Hebrew, I understand that he who controls language controls the conversation. So I'm not going to do that unless it gets really out of hand. So what was this? So the video, what I learned from the video is this. Since I obviously don't know a lot of halacha, and I know even less Gaish law, as Rabbi Blezer likes to call it, no one's here to listen to me. But if you could indulge me, I kind of wanted to share with you how I ended up here. How I kind of rode a wave, and as usual, my modus operandi is to do as little as possible, and still I ended up here. It started with my partner, Bob Stock. He walked into my office in the summer, and he says, Josh, I have an idea. Our law firm has many frum Shomer Shabbos Balabat attorneys, and we should promote that in the community for people who want their disputes resolved through halacha or wants their contracts created with an eye towards halacha. And I told him, that's a great idea. It's a really great idea. So then what did I do? Nothing. I thought about it for a little bit, and I said, okay, yeah, it's a great idea. And then, so he comes back into my office about 2 weeks later. He says, Josh, remember that idea I told you about promoting Batei Dinim and with all the from attorneys? I said, yeah, I remember that idea, great idea. He says, I heard that there's this great scholar in North Miami Beach, Rabbi Blezer, who's been trying to educate the community on the advantages of Beis Din, how it's quicker, more cost-effective, and it's actually the right thing to do. I heard also he's preparing just in case the Sanhedrin comes back for the time of Mashiach. No, that I made up. I don't want the call that they're preparing for Mashiach, but... So I said, oh, Rabbi Blezer, I know Rabbi Blezer. It's a great idea. I live in his community, and I learn with him sometimes. It's a great idea. What did I do? Nothing. I thought about it for a day or two. I said, okay, if I see Rabbi Blezer by a wedding, or maybe when we learn Kollel, I'll mention it to him. So then who calls me, like literally a day or two later? Rabbi Blezer. He calls me up and says, Josh, remember we spoke a while back about Choshim Mishpat and you want to promote Batei Dinim? I said, yes. He says, okay, let's put something together. So really, and then I ended up here. I didn't really do much, as you can tell from my story. So anyways, I thought that was just an interesting Hashgacha Pratis, how kind of I rode a wave and I didn't really do much. But okay, now on to the questions. I would just ask from the Kehila that I know everybody here is very there's reason and they want to answer the questions, but let's at least give the Rabbanim the first chance at the questions. It reminds me of the old story that I think the Brisker Ravi was once sitting with a bunch of people in front of him, and some person came and asked him like a bomb question, and he sits there and he thinks. And he says, like a good chacham, he says, I don't know. So one of the people sitting there says, I also don't know. So anyways, I'm Mavin Yavin. So the first question, let's see. I've been told, Rabbi Blezer, again, he gave me strict rules. He wrote down the questions even for me to write, for me to say. But I'm going to start with, who are we starting with? Oh, Mansour. This is a question, okay. So we learned today and yesterday about all these very intricate laws of Ribis, and that if you don't keep by them, you get no Olam Haba, you lose all your Nechasim. So, it's Kisei Mesim, I'm sorry, it's Kisei Mesim, even worse. So the question is, though, isn't it then better to do business with Goyim? It's better, there's less pitfalls, and so we should stop doing business with Jews, even though we're told always to do business with Jews. But it's much easier to do it with Goyim, where you don't have to worry about this stuff.
I mean, I don't think there's a mitzvah to dispel the question. The question assumes that I'm going to answer. No. You have to do business with Jews because I don't think that necessarily has to be the answer. I think in certain cases, a person knows himself. I don't think the mitzvah of doing business with Jews, if a person is going to run into major pitfalls with all this, especially if he didn't learn Osher Mishpat, this person, if he doesn't know all the laws, I mean, he might be better off doing business with him, so he's not over there, Isurei Doraita every single day. And that might give him a motivation to learn the laws. That might give him a certain, but I think if a person is going in without knowing Osher Mishpat, he might be, with all the respect to the tzaddikim, but he might be better off, bypassing it until he knows it.
Okay, so your position would be to do business with Goyim until you learn halacha.
No, my position would be learn
halacha so you can do it.
And then come back and ask me the question. I don't think the question is before you start learning what do you tell the guy? Yeah, do with Jews and roll dice. Yeah, sometimes you do the beat, sometimes you won't, and whatever it is. But just do business with Jews. I think that's Pikuach Nefesh.
Do any of the other Rabbanim want to chime in on this one, or?
When you discuss Rabbi specifically, I'm not going to give a general cloud, but Rabbi specifically, the answer would be, it depends. If you're dealing with not religious Jews, the answer is 1,000,000%. In the finance industry, it has to be avoided. They're not going to sign a het to iska, and if they do sign a het to iska, they don't know what it means, and they're definitely not going to be. It's usually not going to be valid because it's not going to be a tonight to go to Bezdin, and they're not going to go to Bezdin. If you're dealing with religious Yidden, the question is it's not true. You could write a het to iska. It could be you could write a het to iska, and it could be valid, and both sides should understand what a het to iska is. And then it's a chetchila. So it depends. I mean, that's negay for many things. When we're discussing businesses that sometimes have to run on Shabbos, and you're taking a partner, you want to know if should it be an irreligious Jew or a Gentile. The answer is 100%. It has to be a Gentile, right? And when you look through Shulchan Aruch, when you have shutzvin, it's like a question. When I sell my chumash, I sell to a Jew or a Gentile? The answer is you better sell to a Gentile, right? So it depends. It depends what you're talking about. But if you're talking about Shemitah Torah mitzvahs, and they would keep up the halachas, then I'm not sure if you're insinuating that they won't, but if they will, then 100% they shouldn't be avoided, and then that's a mitzvah, and you'll have you're looking to take employees, and employees Yidden sometimes cost more, but you'll have siyat dishmaya, and it'll be your company will be a kli machzik bracha that'll be able to pay these employees what they living wages in the front community requires.
So there seems to be an agreement of the Rabbanim to. You want to weigh in on this one, or you want me to go to the next one? Whatever. Go next.
Just to weigh in for it. So just to compliment what both the Rabbanim said. I just want to point out the Gemara that I don't know if it came out in the Shir in the past couple of days. The Gemara does say that at one stage Chazal actually made an isser on collecting ribbis from a non-Jew. For what reason? Chazal were very, very motivated to keep us separate from the Goyim for many reasons. And many of the Gzeres D'Rabbanan are designed against too much interaction with Goyim. You can't even make an eruv with the Goy, so that hopefully you'll just move out and see it's too difficult to live here, etc., etc. So I agree 100% with what was said that sometimes it's imperative, you have no choice. But at the same time, I think in a sense the question could be rephrased as, I find it very difficult. I find there's so many halachas, so many things like constantly stumbling. Why is it that I make a bracha every morning, Shalom Asani Goy? I mean, I might have been better off the other way if I could avoid all. So obviously, no one in this world would dream of asking such a question. It's a challenge, and it's a lifetime involvement. But it's something that we have to bite the bullet and deal with it and realize all the benefits and all the godless of it and all the what it brings. So at the same time, while of course, one has to be very careful in what the Rabbanim mentioned, but as Rabbi Mansour mentioned, the idea of learning the halachas and making sure that you know how to do business with a Jew is the answer, and taking the challenge and figuring out the right way and constantly seeking guidance, even when you know the halachas, like guidance from Rebbeim, come to shiurim such as this and figure out how to do it the right way. And then when you have a specific shayla, in this particular case, selling my chametz in a chanami, or if anything else falls into that category, in a chanami. But derech klal, of course, our goal should be to be able to integrate, socialize, and do business with our brethren as much as possible.
Okay, very good. I'll keep with you if it's okay, Rabbi Friedman. This is the next question. That it says many offices are open places, But oftentimes, especially if we're going to, as I said many times, offices are open places. But if we're going to listen to the advice of Rabbi Mansour, we're going to stay late and we're going to work hard. And then it could be faced with a situation. Oh, just on time. Fine. It could be that we're faced with problems of yichud, with a secretary, something like that. So what's a good eitzah for people dealing with those potential issues?
Okay, so you mentioned I should respond?
Yeah.
Okay, so there isn't one answer that could address all the situations. Obviously, a person who is in a situation where he finds a possible question of yichud should ask. And again, here's a case where a person has to be familiar with the basic halachas of hilchas yichud to know when to ask a shayla, what's a shayla, and what's not. But when a person has a shayla, he has to ask. One thing just to mention that with today's workplace, it's extremely common that there are going to be security cameras. And if there's a camera with a live stream, that may be an eitzah. Meaning, if you have somebody who you know is watching or could be watching at any time, not just the camera that's there in order to ward off, certain things, but a camera that's actually there because there's somebody that cares. Like, you'll have some offices where there's a board in front. Many offices, a board in front in the main office, and they're watching all over the building at any time. So that could be a bit of a hatzalah. It's a sense like a Pesach Pesuach that you're constantly being supervised, or a person could maybe set that up use his own device and have his wife tuning in at any given time. And many poskim say that will work to mitigate the yichud issues. Now, again, this is not supposed to be a halacha shir, so we're not saying halacha l'maisa yes or no exactly, but this is something that a person could inquire. In general, though, what I find is many of the shilas of yichud go beyond technical yichud, beyond what says in Shulchan Aruch Even Ezer, but they get into more broad shilas of tznius, of hanhaga, of what's roy, what's not roy. Many times people ask me, well, my wife's going out of town, and I have a female boarder. Is it okay if I have this child, this one? So your wife's going out of town, and you have a female boarder, whatever it is. That's not right. Stop right there. Find her another place for one night. It's just not the right thing to do. Whether hilchas yichud is the deterrent or not. And I think that's what we have to take into consideration here too. That it's not just the technical yichud shayla which has to be asked, but it's, even if we get beyond that, is that secretary there every day when you're there, and very often the two of you alone, and maybe she's. We don't have to take it any further, but that's something that has to be given consideration.
Just one follow-up, and you can answer this. Other Rabbanim. At what point does being friendly become being flirty? At what point should we be careful?
I'll take. You want to speak? Okay. A few things I want to say.
At what point does being friendly with a secretary or something like that become flirty? That it goes beyond the line.
I'm going to speak for me and Rabbi Mansour. I want to say a few things. This is general about tznius, and what I've noticed when people calling the ruach the question. I'm just going to say it quickly. I'm just going to say it quickly.
It's too loud.
So that's something you see. So Rabbi said, someone called me, and he works in Manhattan. He's an accountant. And he's a friend of mine from Yeshiva, Ben Torah. And he was careful not to shake hands with a woman. And, Steipel holds shaking hands as Yarek Bal Yaver, others are Mekel, but Ben Torah try not to shake hands with women. And he told me he wasn't shaking hands. And he's like a very proper guy. And he said it's becoming so socially awkward for him. His whole day is revolving about what angle he's in and where he's going to be and who's going to be. And he can't go on like this. And he asked me, he asked me to call my father-in-law, Shlomo Miller, and he's like, I need a heter. I can't go on like this anymore. I said, if you're going to have to call someone else, he's not going to give you a heter. He said, no, but this fellow's from Toronto. He says, I would trust him, could you call him? And my father told me as follows, and it's 100% true, and I see it all the time. Many times, he doesn't want to be in a social, awkward situation. Many times, people, when they have tznius, I'm discussing tznius in general, when they have these tznius issues, and they say it's awkward because it's awkward to them. They are uncomfortable with it, which means as follows. We are Bnei Torah, we are Yidden, we have our own code, we are Melechus Kohanim Goy Kodesh, and we have boundaries. And people have to be proud of those boundaries. And when he says it's uncomfortable not to shake a hand, he kind of finds it primitive. He looks at it like this is a little backwards. And he's not comfortable with it. But when you are comfortable with it, there's nothing to be awkward about. Now, in general, I'm discussing shaking hands. I understand when someone sticks out your hand, you can be a little, and if you don't prepare, then suddenly you find your hand out, because that's the way people don't want to snub people. And I recommend you go in front of a mirror, and practice. What are you going to say when someone shakes your hand? To the point where you have it down and it's smooth. But the point is, the hashkafa should be, is that tznius issues for Yidden is not awkward. And you look what's going on in the Goy Shevel, where the liberals completely removed all the boundaries, and it's complete chaos. And they want to know, why are men behaving like this? And the answer is, because there are no boundaries. And there's nothing wrong with us having boundaries. There's nothing wrong. And a person has to be proud of those boundaries. And when you are proud of them, people respect you for it, because it should be respected. And you say, I'm not shaking your hand because you're a woman. My wife doesn't shake hands with a man. It's nothing to do with men or women. You understand? We have loyalty to my spouse, and that's it. And we have boundaries, and there's nothing wrong with that. Now, Benegea, relationships in the office, and I tell this to people all the time, Benegea Yichud, there's a heter in Yichud called Baila Be'ir, right? If the husband's in the city. You lose that heter when it's Libe Gaspa, when you're somewhat friendly. What's the line? I think the line is, you don't call someone by the first name. And people think, well, that's a chinyak thing. Well, it could be it's chinyak, but lahalacha, I think you lose that heter of Baila Be'ir. Because why call someone by the first name? If you call someone the first name, it's friendly. And when you call someone by the formal name, Mrs. So-and-so, it's formal. And the relation should be formal. So if you want to know what crosses the line, I think what crosses the line is calling people by their first name. And he agrees.
I'll just sum it up. Again, I don't think we have any argument on this. First of all, I think HaKadosh Baruch Hu reset a lot of the world where they don't have too much problem with shaking hands now because we have the COVID excuse now. Oh, so going on now, COVID. I'm not vaccinated, okay. It used to be when somebody sneezed, they used to say Chaim Tovim. Now they say Yimach Shemo. So I think that can bring us back. They always have that excuse. There's a famous story to the rabbi's point that we have to be proud of our Gedarim and our Siyagim. From Mordechai Eliyahu, Alav Shalom, the former chief rabbi of Israel, if I'm not mistaken, met with the Queen of England. And the Queen extended her hand to the rabbi, and Mordechai Eliyahu just stood, in place and did not return the hand. And it was in the next page in the London Times, a big picture, and they were criticizing the rabbi. Look at these, barbaric rabbis that come from Israel, no derech eretz, no conduct. The Queen of England, she come to extend your hand, derech eretz. The guy doesn't know simple protocol. Turns out there was a correction that when they looked at the protocols of the Queen, she's not supposed to extend a hand to an Orthodox rabbi. So therefore, actually, she broke the rule on that one, and the rabbi was and they had to make take it back in order to say that actually the rabbi was right. But that's actually power. Today, of course, they would look at that move as, look how ethical and look how proper. The Gemara in Ta'anit, which I think is, the Gemara tells us these stories in order that we can learn from them. Otherwise, there's no reason just to tell us stories. The Gemara is not a storybook, obviously. And the Gemara says that there were certain rabbis that used to get the communications from heaven. One rabbi used to get the communication once a year before Yom Kippur. One rabbi would get it once a week, and Shabbat. And then there was a doctor. They called him Abba Umana, and he would get a call every day. So the rabbis were shocked. It's a tzaddikim, this guy's a doctor. I mean, there's a Tov Shevarofi, but we know what it says at the end of that Mishnah. But the point is, what did he do with this Abba Umana that he gets such a daily call? And they said because he was a bloodletter, and he knew that some of his patients are going to be female, so he invented a certain type of sleeve that he could put on the patient, which exposes the minimum amount just to get the needle in there. And he made separate waiting rooms. And because of that he had a concern that his office was siniut friendly. That means he was the office manager, he was the doctor, so he set the culture in the office. I mean, look at how much nahat ruach that gave HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So if you're a worker, that's one thing. You really can't set the pay. But if you're an employer, if you're the boss, you're the boss. So you could be like Abba Umana. You can be able to set certain standards and certain rules in the office in order to make it sini'ut friendly. And according to that Gemara, that person deserves the highest accolade and respect from Yeshiva Shirman.
Very good. I heard a practical advice from someone that you should have if you're expecting a woman at a meeting, to have a cup or something in your hand, or maybe files, because then that awkwardness doesn't happen.
Yeah, but that's right. What the Rabbi was saying. That's maybe like you're not comfortable.
Okay, but you don't get into an awkward situation. Yeah, I mean, I guess you can. Right. Here, Rabbi Kirsha, this is for you. I know this. You might have a bias here because you're a Dayan, but we're told always that machlokes is like fire, and I can tell you from personal experience, it eats people up from the inside. And we're told that being mevater is so important, especially now in preparation for Yom Narayim, that we're supposed to be mavram midasov. And so where is there room for a monetary dispute? At what point does it say, okay, I'm not going to be mevater, I'm actually going to take them to Bezdin? We should just be mevater always and avoid machlokas, no?
No. I do have a bias, and the Yori Luminous Kabeh over here. When you have a valid tefillah on somebody, a valid taina on somebody, when someone owes you money, you should collect the money. You shouldn't be mevater on that chayv. When you have a valid tefillah on somebody, I don't know why we have to call it machlekes. You know, not every case is a machlekes. I'm going to read from a Chazon Ish. You know, I think we once did it here. We once learned the laws of Yored L'Umnis Chaverai, that how a person conducts his business. Sometimes the competition is being unfair, and sometimes competition is fair, right? And the Gemara says, if someone comes from a different city, right, and he's selling his goods, but he doesn't belong in this city, the Gemara said that's inappropriate competition. If someone lives in this city, that's appropriate competition. And the Gemara goes through all these cases: people stealing deals, people stealing workers, all these halachas. And the Chazon Ish, this is in Yonah D'Yom, the Chazon Ish has a wonderful piece here in Emunah B'Tachon, and he says, what's going on over here? We know the Rabbi Shalom said, Kol Mezayna Shel Adam is K'tzuf Min Rosh Hashanah. Whatever he's supposed to make, he's going to make. Whatever he's not supposed to make, he's not going to make. So now, someone came from a different city. So how could he affect you in any way? How could he affect you in any way? So the Chazon Ish says as follows. He says, even though Kol Mezayna Shel Adam is K'tzuf Min Rosh Hashanah Ad Yom Kippur, and you can't take away any money if it comes from a different city. He says, hishtadlus mitzidoy v'choiv harchokas hanezek mitzidoy v'loy motzi ma'akiv einzim b'shem choiv. He says, iloy motzi ma'akiv ein by choiv hishtadlus. You understand? So he says as follows. He says, when you have someone who comes and is interfering with your business, he says, now you have a sugya of harchakas nezakin. Someone's damaging you. Al pi shulchan aruch, he's damaging you. Are you allowed to let someone damage you and say, I'm being mevater? And the answer is no. Because if you let someone do that, you're encouraging bad behavior. That's what you're doing. And you're not supposed to encourage bad behavior. If someone's doing something wrong, you have it, clear tefillah on him. Clear tefillah. So he says, but what about the fact that Mezayna Shel Adam is K'tzuf? And the answer is, it is. But you have to go to work. And you have to do ishtadlus. And your ishtadlus is to stay in your lane and keep that lane clear. And someone just went into your lane like you're driving on a highway. So what do? You beep. So how do you beep? You take him to Bezdin. And you say, you're in my lane. And there's still no machlokes. You're just letting him know he's in your lane. Now Bezdin is going to rule. Bezdin's going to rule. And Bezdin's going to say if he's being over, if he's not. Now the Chassid says a wonderful thing. Let's say Bezdin says, nope, he's not being over on the laws of Yored L'Umnis. Are you happy or are you not happy? Says the Chazon Ish, you're very happy. Now Yechiv Ishtadlus is leave it. And if not, Yechiv Ishtadlus is to shut him down and you have to follow up, right? It's all about Ishtadlus. And he says, this is not mitzad the mitzius that you try to save money. It's all Yechiv Ishtadlus. You understand? Now, with that said, There are times when there's interpersonal disputes, and it could be involved in families, it can be involved in close neighbors. People have different tainas. If you go to Beis Din, you might win because maybe you're machzik in the money, even though the person has tainas. So, in such a case, you want to know if you should be mevater? Of course you should try to be mevater. There's different cases. If someone is wronging you, really, really wronging you, then, and a person should be a shmata, that's wrong. So ultimately, I'm not avoiding your question. I'm saying it depends on the thing. You know, this summer there was a fellow in the bungalow colony with me, a very, very wealthy yid, and he was telling me a story of what was going on in his house. And he said there was someone who brokered for his wife, a cleaning lady, and they were charging him $100 a week just for the brokerage, which wasn't a one-time fee. It sounded a little steep, but this fellow was okay. The cleaning lady left. And the woman, the broker, said, I'm still charging you every week $100 because I'm still working on it. And this went on for 3 weeks. And this fellow was paying. He was paying $100. Can you believe that? And I said, that's outrageous. And he tells me, listen, she must really need the money. You understand? And I said, I want to tell you something. I don't know if it's right or wrong. I think you're encouraging bad behavior. Because it's just not proper what's going on. Yeah, and this person's becoming emboldened. And I said, let's go ask my father-in-law, Rabbi Shlomo Miller. And we went to him. We said, is this proper or improper? He said, this doesn't sound very proper. You understand? And he said, so he's like, what should I do? I said, I'll go to Beis Din and say, you want to, with her, discuss it with a third party. And he's like, who should it be? I said, this side, any third party. You're really good to go. You understand? But that's the thing. So should he be mevater? It really depends on the case. When again, every person has an inherent biases. Sometimes it's hard to see straight, and you have to acknowledge the biases. So when there's a shaila and they have a taina, and even if they can't maybe be mitzvah moment in Beis Din, if there is some sort of taina, a person should try to avoid machlokes and try to give in if he can. With the same thought, just to say, Beis Din should close down, I won't stand for that.
Rabbi Mansour, you want to weigh in?
I want to make a clarification, because when we hear the word vitur is not something that's limited, in a beit din. Of course, the question is, should we be mevater? You have a lot of opportunities to be mevater in life. If you're married, you can be mevater every second of your life to your wife. Yeah. If you have neighbors, I mean, it's not like you're gonna. If the rabbi answers you, you shouldn't be mevater, then you go say, hey, wait, you did away with a whole chapter in the Torah Devorah. No, don't worry about it. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for vitur, even if you're a guy that's going to take every guy that owes you money to beit din, and probably vitur begins at home. And that's probably the more difficult of the yielding than to yield to a stranger. Furthermore, Al Pi Hadrash, I'll say that the Gemara says, Iyov vatran b'mamoneh hama. That Iyov was a vatran with his money. Well, obviously he's a vatran with his money. He's not going to be a vatran with somebody else's money. And I think that's the point of the Gemara. When it came to a question whose money it is, then Iyov is not a vatran. Only once it's established whose mammon it is, and they say, Iyov, it's your mammon. Now I'll be a vatran. I'll give it out, I'll give it to tzedakah. But if it's a question whose mammon is it in the first place, it doesn't say Iyov was a vatran on that. First it had to be mammon, his, mammoneh. Last but not least, I learned with a dayan back in Brooklyn for 10 years, Rabbi Hashwal, who was a big dayan in Brooklyn. And he told me, as a dayan, what he finds, and the rabbi obviously knows it better than all of us, okay, you have two tzaddikim that come into court, and the rabbi gives you're innocent, you're guilty, you have to pay. He says, you don't know how many enemies I've made, people who will not come to me on Rosh Hashanah to wish me Shana Tovah, because I ruled against them in Beit Din. Now, why don't you tell the guy, why don't you be mevater on that? Which means to be mevater in a sense to accept the judgment and not have any claims after the case is once the Beit Din has ruled, you're innocent, you're guilty. Now you have to yield to your desire to take a revenge against the dayan, or you have sour grapes against the guy. That also is so it's possible to take the guy to Beit Din and even win and still be mebatir v'mamoneh in whatever way. And certainly, if you lose, you still have opportunities to be mebatir as well.
I think probably have maybe time for like 1 or 2 questions. But do you want?
I think the Rabbanim dealt with that quite accurately.
Okay, good. Is there any questions from the crowd other than Shimi? No.
That was my question. You said not being matter on money. What about Hashem decides what we make every year? What about Hashem causes? Is it the same teretz that Hashem, nothing will happen to you unless Hashem causes it? Even if you step up, stub your toe, look out for all different money, we still say the same teretz that whatever the din is by that we can get our money that's ours, Hashem causes to happen. Maybe Hashem wants us to go through the program. Should we still apply the same answer that we should still pursue the justice that's there?
Again, when there's a clear claim that you have, it seems from the Chazon is saying is that's nichlal in yechiyah v'shtadlis. A person shouldn't be embarrassed by the fact that he's motivated for self-interest. Self-interest is an important motivation. What do you want? Someone else to watch over you? You should be we see by tzedakah, even though tzedakah is so wonderful, but the last thing the Rebbeinu Shalom wants is that we nitzvah l'briyas, that we have to come on to other people. Self-interest is an important motivation, and when there's a clear claim that you have, the Chazon says that's included in your hishtadlus to run your mumminus. To run your mumminus. So that's what he says.
And even though you could live with this sort of it's not convenient, you can afford this mammon situation.
It's hard to answer specific questions. I'm trying to give a general formula.
Okay, well, one more question, and it's hard to phrase, so forgive me if I'm saying it wrong, but essentially now you were mentioning before that the world is crazy. It's upside down. You have men who think they're women who think they're men, all this crazy stuff. So you meet someone in your work, and they're so happy that they just had a girl, but you call it a girl, and they say it's not, the gender's not assigned yet, and all this stuff. Like, how are we supposed to be dealing with this? Are we just supposed to be, okay, you guys are crazy, move on, or are we supposed to push back and or be happy for them? Rabbi Friedman.
Yeah, Rabbi Friedman, it's your turn.
Rules are rules.
The luck of the draw.
So I actually read the original nusach of the question, and it included also if somebody comes over and tells you that he just got engaged. Oh, terrific! Mazel tov. What's her name? Well, it's not exactly a her, you know. So how do you react? And what's the balance? I think what's the balance between? I don't think there's a balance. I think it's absolutely pashut that in terms of our attitude, our approach, we have to take a completely 100% firm approach. Where there are certain things where there's no wiggle room. There's no giving. There's no leeway. There's no ability to say that, okay, look, you have your lifestyle, I have my lifestyle. Absolutely not. Now, does that mean you come out and you give the guy a frask in the face and say, no, absolutely not. I don't mean that. I don't mean that you have to be necessarily outspoken. You have to right away raise a flag and say, oh, look what's going. This is an abomination. But there shouldn't be any question about the person, about your colleagues and the people in the workplace and your friends and your neighbors, what you hold. I mean, there should be no possibility of them thinking that it is okay with you and you could tolerate it and you're a little bit you're accepting and you're inclusive. They shouldn't dream of that for a minute, because we're not inclusive when it comes to things like, as you mentioned, or the thing that I mentioned. We're not inclusive. We're completely exclusive, because the Torah is completely exclusive. And Torah Vat Hashem, many of these. I'm sorry, I wasn't imitating. But I'm a study cover all day. So. There's certain things which are clearly listed in the Torah as a to'eva, and that's not going to move and that's not going to change. And we have to let people understand that is our approach, and that is the emes, and that is not going to budge in any which way. That doesn't mean, again, that you have to stop putting up banners in the office, etc. But if anyone should think that you are okay with it, or I think part of the question was, do you go to the engagement party? I mean, that's not a question. That's not. It's a non. In my opinion, it's a non-starter, a non-brainer. There's nothing to talk about. But and it has to be, as I said, just that it has to be that people understand that and understand your approach, and and it really touched a little bit on what Rabbi Kushner mentioned before about that we're not apologetic about it and we're not awkward about it. Things like this, it's pashut, and I think anybody with will realize that there's an emes and there's a norm, and then there's the rest of the world.
No. I think a lot of the ruach of such questions are because people themselves feel maybe it's lacking in their, this is the wrong word, it's lacking in their pride. And no pun intended. And we have to. There's nothing to be unproud about. There's not. If you feel in a sense that we are primitive, then you have to work on yourself. That's really what it's not. It's 100%. We should be 100% proud of all these positions.
Don't be
apologetic. And it shouldn't be like, listen, this is what the Torah said. It's not me, it's him. It shouldn't be like that. This is 100% the truth, and it's right, and we stand behind it. And there should be nothing awkward in our approach to these type of things.
Very good. Thank you.
There's lunch in the sukkah for anyone.